Hello my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today I've got another book talk video to share with you guys. And today we are going to be talking about the 2017 winner of the Giller Prize, that is Bellevue Square by Michael Redhill. Now this was my first time reading anything by Michael Redhill. I didn't know much about him or his writing style, but every, fall, once the nominees for the Giller Prize come announced, I make it a point to pick some of them up, to give them a read, and I always enjoy them. There's been a few that I didn't love, but I always enjoy seeing what's been nominated and trying to guess which one's gonna win. But I didn't get to this one until after he had won, and this one is a doozy. So let's just jump right on into it. The book starts with a woman named Jean, and she owns a bookshop in Toronto in the Bellevue Square area called Bookshop. There's a line where she says, after she tells us the name of her bookshop, she says, "I practice subtlety in other areas of my life," and I found that line to be so funny. So her name is Jean. She's a middle-aged woman. She has a husband. She has 2 kids. She lives a pretty normal life. And then one day, quite out of the blue, first one of her regular customers comes in, and he is distraught. He's kind of like, "How did you get here so quickly? I just saw you in the park." And she's like, "What? No, I've been here. I wasn't in the park." And he starts to get really aggressive, and he even goes so far as to reach across and try to pulls at her hair, because he says, "When I saw you in the park, you had shorter hair." And she's like, "Excuse me." She is obviously very startled. Once he realizes her hair won't come off, it's not a wig, he kind of snaps out of it, and he's like, I'm so sorry," and he leaves. A little while after that, a woman named Katerina, she's a Guatemalan woman, she comes in, and she also gives Jean word of this woman who looks just like her, who's been spotted in the neighborhood at the park. This woman, Katerina, has seen her at the restaurant where she works, and Katerina sort of makes it sound to to Jean, as though she has a bit of a friendship with this other woman whose name is Ingrid. And then that woman leaves, and now Jean's sort of left with this weird feeling, knowing that there's this doppelganger of hers out wandering the very same neighborhood. So as it would, curiosity gets the best of her, and she decides that she's gonna just go down to this park and see if she can see the doppelganger. So she goes down, and she sits around and she waits, and she doesn't see it. She kind of asks around a bit, but no one really has any information for her. And then very quickly, as time starts to pass, she becomes obsessed with finding this doppelganger. She sort of leaves the bookshop to the employee Terrence that she has working there, and she, instead of going to work, she goes to the park for like 8 hours a day trying to find this doppelganger. It completely takes over her life. When she tries to look up the information about the original customer, the man who was pulling at her hair and very aggressively trying to tell her about it, she looks up his information. She goes to call him, and the person who answers the phone tells her that he has recently committed suicide since she saw him last. And that, that really sort of gives her the creeps, because he was so upset when she saw him last. So already this book is just shrouded in this feeling of dread. There's nothing scary that's happening so far, but when I'd be reading it, I would be creeped out to my core. Even like when I was reading it in bed, there was one night, I have a little night light by the bed that I keep on for reading and then turn off. I kept it on all night just because there was just this really eerie feeling that I couldn't shake. So after trying to get in touch with the old man, finding out he had passed away, she goes to the restaurant where she knows that this Katerina woman works. And she tries to get more info from her, and eventually she even writes a letter. And she says, please give this to Ingrid and tell her that I want to meet her in the park. And Katerina kind of tries to tell her, well, she's very sick. She's in and out of hospitals. I can't make any guarantees for you, Jean. And so Jean's like, whatever. So she goes back to the park to wait to see, to see if she can see her again. And at this point, she's neglecting so much of her life, like her home life, her work life. Everything's falling apart, and she is just obsessed. She even does this weird thing where she, with pen and paper, she keeps track of all of the people in the park that she sees that aren't the doppelganger. So I found that a little strange. Like, why are you doing that? She also befriends and meets a lot of people, a lot of homeless people that frequent the park, some mentally ill people that frequent the park. She befriends them, and she begins to have relationships with them. And she notices sometimes that some of them leave the park and then don't return. And so she starts to think that there's something, a little dark and violent maybe that's happening with this doppelganger. And she starts to get a little paranoid, like maybe she's gonna be next, and that's what the doppelganger's been working up to the whole time. And so the book just continues to build this story, to build this mystery, to build this sort of tension. And Michael Redhill is a masterful storyteller. And yeah, you're compelled to keep reading. I couldn't stop. I went through it so quickly because I needed to know what happens. Who is Ingrid? Who even is Jean at this point? You get to the point where you're like, I don't know any of these people. And Jean starts to really present herself as an unreliable narrator, which is another thing I love in books. So if you want to read this book, now's the time to stop watching this video, because I'm going to touch a bit on the spoilers. I'm not going to go too deep into the spoilers, mainly because I wouldn't even know how I would at this point. But yes, if you don't want any spoilers at all, now's the time to stop reading. Okay, so one thing that kept coming to my mind as we were reading this was that there was going to be a twist towards the end. And I thought very surely that the twist was going to be that Jean suffers from some sort of mental illness. What kind of mental illness? I wasn't sure, but I thought that's where we were headed. And that is where we were headed. And I remember thinking at some point, if this is how it turns out, I'm going to be so disappointed. But I wasn't disappointed. The mental illness that Jean has, I honestly don't know too much about. From what I can tell, it's a very, very rare one. And how it works is when she looks in a mirror, she doesn't recognize what she's seeing as being her reflection. She thinks that it's something else. Similarly, when she looks at a picture of herself, she can't process that that's her. And so somewhere in her mind, something sort of disassociates, I guess, and so she began to think that she was looking at somebody else. We find out too that she does not own a bookstore. She was a teacher who's now on leave because her mental illness has gotten so out of control. She does go to the park, and the bookstore that she thinks she owns is actually a pet store, and in there is an employee named Terrence. And it all comes to a head in a way that I can't even explain. There are times before the ending when she's put in the hospital, she's medicated, and she starts to try to really make some progress. Even though at first, the doctor was like, oh, you'll only be here a week, and then, 2 weeks pass, and he's like, probably just a few more weeks. And we noticed that a lot of the people that she had known in the park are also people in this mental hospital. And towards the end, she breaks out with one of the other patients, one that she knew from the park, a man named Jimmy. And she kind of just goes on this huge final search because the medication isn't really working as well as they thought it had been or hoped it would. And they go on this final hunt for Ingrid. And it ends with a big bang. And normally, after I read a book, I don't want to read the reviews until after I filmed my video, because I don't want my review to be tainted at all by other people's thoughts. You know what I mean? I just want to get my own thoughts out, and then after, I love reading the reviews after, to see what other people thought. And when I went to the Goodreads review, it had, it has a fairly high rating. I think it's almost 4 stars. And people seem to enjoy it, but also in their reviews, they were like, oh, what just happened? What did I read? What is any of this? And it's such a mind bender that it's out of this world, but it's such a good book. And I noticed in the acknowledgements, he says that this is the first book of a 3-book project, sort of about modern ghosts. So I'm wondering if, as it goes on, we're going to learn more. I don't know if the next book will also be about Jean and her doppelganger and this situation, or if it's going to be a completely different story, but I can't wait to read it. It's going to be good, I'm sure. This was such a joy to read. Even during the times when I was absolutely petrified, even though, like I said, the fear isn't like, you're not reading, it's not horror, it's just so scary because it's so, like, there's not even a word, it's so just the dread, the building dread when you don't know what's happening, you don't know what's going on. So if you love mysteries with, some really underlying, unsettling, uneasy threads, you will absolutely love this book. And if you've read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So, yeah. There we go. Before I go, though, of course, I'm going to do my shout-out. Today's shout-out goes to my dear friend here on YouTube, Janine's Life. She's absolutely amazing. She makes great content. She does unboxings and makeup looks, and her personality, you guys, she's out of this world. You'll just love her. So, of course, her link is in the description. Go check her out. Let her know that I sent you. Right now, I'm currently playing all her videos because I just love her. So, yeah, thanks, guys. So that's going to do it for me for today, you guys. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope you had a nice Valentine's Day, whether with your sweetheart or with yourself. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, guys.